Welcome, UCF fans, to another edition of the Daily Night. I am your host, Brian Smith, and today is Wednesday, and it's just a couple of days after all the bowl games. Some of the recruiting's been taken care of. So I just kind of wanted to circle back and kind of look at recruiting a little bit and talk about what UCF gained, as well as some of their future rivals gained on signing day, as UCF is just a little over a year away from being a part of the Big 12. Now, a few things. I've got another screen over here, and I'll share my screen in a minute. The two schools that I'm going to compare UCF with in terms of the Big 12 are the two that finished in the top two, Oklahoma State and Baylor. Those two are going to be in the conference. Obviously, Texas and Oklahoma are leaving, joining the Southeastern Conference. I want to talk about what they've done at some of the critical positions as compared to UCF. Now, this is just a one-class overview. Make no bones about it. It's just one class in coaching and development, the transfer portal, all of that goes into it. But it's just a comparison, and it kind of gives things a perspective. And the article I'm putting this podcast in on Inside the Nights on Fan Nation, powered by Sports Illustrated, went into depth on three of the kids that UCF signed, Ja'Cari and Demari Henerson, as well as Nikai Martinez, the offers that they received, and compared them to a couple of the kids from Baylor. And it's pretty interesting to me because, like, the same thing with Oklahoma State, while they do a very good job of developing players there, especially on defense, and I've said this 100 times and I'll say it probably 1,000 more, you recruit defense, you can scheme to a certain degree on offense because you know where the ball's going. You're in an advantage. You're in a one-step advantage, give or take, on every play. Defensively, you need more talent than the other team's offense. Period. It's recruiting. UCF really stepped up their game defensively at the skill spots and the edge defenders and things like that. That, you know, they just got two transfers that are very talented players, one of which I thought was the most gifted just on the field player in the country, regardless of school who signed him. And Terrence Lewis in 2021 went to Maryland. He's transferring back. So that's another example. UCF is getting faster. They are getting more athletic. With that being stated, I'm just going to start with Baylor. I have all the respect in the world for Dave Aranda. I think he is a tremendous, tremendous football coach. They run a 3-4 scheme. He's a defensive coordinator by trade. His background, the two primaries here would be Wisconsin and LSU, two programs that do a fantastic job churning out NFL players, running good schemes, etc. He ran the 3-4. Both those did very well. He was the defensive coordinator on LSU's 2019 national title team that, in my opinion, is about as good a team there's ever been in college football for a one-year, one-hit wonder kind of deal. But bottom line, they're not signing the type of players based on offers. Let me give a premise here. Based on offers that UCF is. And they just won the Big 12. They won the Sugar Bowl 21-7 over Ole Miss. I'm just going to use a couple of examples. Got a couple kids kind of singled out, and I haven't watched their film. The only thing I'm doing here is just comparing offers. No more, no less. Defensive back to me, other than quarterback's the obvious, is the most important position on the football field. If you don't believe, you can look at another Big 12 school who I'll talk about in a moment, Oklahoma State. They absolutely dragged Notre Dame over the coals in the second half of that bowl game because of one player. Notre Dame has one super corner and one who's not good. Well, guess who they threw it at? Over and over and over and over and over. I've never seen a player get picked on more in a college game. If you are not good at corner, the other 10 guys on the field are all but mitigated to mediocre at best. That's why corner recruiting is paramount every single year. UCF has Demari, who's going to play safety, and Ja'Cari is going to play corner, the two twins from Seminole High School. And they also have another player who's very talented, Nikai Martinez. All these guys, all three of them, had offers from like South Carolina, Florida, Miami, etc. In the article, it details the list. But a plethora of ACC and SEC schools. They're long, they're athletic, they have the attitude, they have a defensive swagger. They're guys that are going to come in and help UCF right away. Make no mistake, they'll be on the 2-deep on special teams the day they walk in, and they'll be in the 3-deep at corner or safety or whatever pretty much right after that. And I wouldn't be surprised if they moved into the 2-deep at any spot, just depending on how they want to align any of the three, because they're just talented. And DB is one of those spots where talent I mean, I hate to say it like this, but it just trumps technique more than at most positions. Either you can run with a really fast receiver or you cannot. So with that, I was looking at Baylor, which, I think, hey, they just came off this really good season. They probably got some pretty good DBs. Dave's a really good defensive coach, and he's tremendous. What's the deal here? Let's compare. And I was shocked at what they had going on. And why it ended up being this way, I have no idea. I was shocked at what Baylor was able to line up at the defense, just one spot here, DB, corner safety. The top couple of guys, just UCF way over recruited them. Corey Gordon, he's out of Oklahoma City, ironically. They went north one state, picked him up, and he had Baylor, but he didn't have any other Power 5 offers. None. Zero. I mean, not Pac-12, nothing. Dartmouth, Abilene Christian, Hawaii, New Mexico. If that is arguably your best DB, you're in trouble. Then other guys, Reggie Bush, he plays in the Dallas area, plays for a good program. Air Force, Colorado State, Navy. Again, not the same. If UCF is going to compete with them, it's a lot more than just DB. I'm just using a small microcosm here. At the same time, this is a very good sign for UCF. Baylor is not a recruiting juggernaut by any means, but they'll pick up because they won the Sugar Bowl, beat Ole Miss, etc. They'll pick up, but they don't have anybody listed as a transfer yet. That's one thing. UCF obviously has Terrence, etc. They've got KD, McDaniel. It's they're getting some good players there as well, but they're out recruiting them at the high school level too. When they first announced that UCF would not just be joining, but joining in a couple of years, I got a little bit sick to my stomach. I'm thinking the depth here concerns me. They've had a lot of history offensively, but defensively, UCF has had a few big home run hitters that are really good, but the drop-off has been magnificent, if you know what I mean. This year, they improved tremendously, and they were basically freshmen and sophomores with a couple of juniors. They're all pretty much coming back. And they've got these guys coming in too. UCF can now take that next step in their last year of being a non-Power 5 institution. When you combine that with the teams that you're going to compete with, and I guarantee you Baylor will be one of the better programs. Dave Aranda can coach. You're still going to win with talent more than anything else. It's just reality. All these schools in the SEC, just use as an example, they all pay these guys a ton of money. The teams that end up in the big bowls in the championships are still the ones that recruit the best. Period. Nick Saban's a great coach, but he ain't winning titles without 5 stars. Every league has its own little level, and you try to move things around. And of course, there's a lot of changing going on in college football. But for the Big 12 overall to improve, we need Baylor to recruit better, quite frankly, because you can't just beat somebody 34-7 and get a lot of acclaim for it. But I expect them to move up. But it's interesting that they didn't do better. Now, the other school, Oklahoma State, I just mentioned them a minute ago. Gundy's a very good coach. He's an odd guy, and he's very outspoken about what he thinks about reporters and stuff. His, I'm a man speech and all that will be famous forever. That was probably 10 or so years ago. But the thing about him that's very interesting is he's always found a way to take athletes and move them around and gain the most out of them. Running backs in particular, he's done a tremendous job with. Their system, passing the ball, is well known. They torched Notre Dame. They don't have a really good secondary because their best DB was opted out and their one corner is terrible. But this is a program that you would think would finally, they've been good for a while, not necessarily great, but you would think they'd start getting some big time corners and stuff like that. They're not. Looking at their list, it's just so offensive heavy. It's ridiculous. Like their top half dozen players in their class are all offense. Not a good sign for Oklahoma State. They had a good defense this year that was really experienced, and you can do that every few years. But again, on defense, talent trumps everything. Talent. It's the same thing over and over. Their top DB, I don't know. If he can play corner, he's going to make some money. His name's Cameron Epps, and he's out of one of the best programs in the Midwest, Chaminade in St. Louis. He's listed at 6'3", so he's probably 6'1.5", but that's a big corner. And he had some decent offers. He had BC, he had Kansas, he had Arkansas. He signs with Oklahoma State. Still just a mid-level guy, though. He's not as good as any of the 3 DBs that UCF signed. This is a very good trend for UCF, at least within the Big 12 conference. You cannot win games consistently. I mean, you can always win a shootout, but you cannot win games consistently against top-notch, meaning top 10, top 20 competition without corners. Teams will out-scheme you to death. Ask Notre Dame. You must have bunches of them, and it's the hardest position to recruit. Nobody wants to play. They all want to play offense. Why? The rules. If you look at a receiver, you get a flag thrown against you, especially in the NFL. And it's just hard to find them. And it's quite honestly why Georgia and Alabama, LSU, and a handful of schools are always ranked really high. They get the corners. This is not a good sign if this is your best recruit. I mean, he's got a tremendous amount of upside, but if that's your top guy, I'm curious to see what Oklahoma, this is a very important year for Oklahoma State coming up in 23, along with UCF, Baylor, everybody, but they have to take another step up if they want to consistently be in the Big 12 title game, etc., even after Oklahoma and Texas take a leave from the Big 12 and move over to the SEC. You're not going to just win with seniors every year. They had a one corner that was really good in the Notre Dame game. Really, really good. I can't remember his name, but maybe he's just a kid that developed. That's going to be the unusual outcome more than the common one. You need elite DBs to move forward as a program. So my overall theme here is this. UCF, Gus Malzahn came in, I think it was the 15th of February last year, so a little less than 11 months ago. He's able to rally the troops on his staff, and Gus gets after it on the recruiting trail. Travis Williams and Coach Gibbs, etc. They've done a really good job. Gibbs is a very underrated recruiter, by the way. He's the DB coach, co-defense coordinator with Travis. They have done more in a short time than Power 5 schools did in the state of Texas, which is basically on par with Florida in terms of talent. 6 one way, half dozen the other. And UCF's not even in the Power 5 yet. This is a great sign for UCF moving forward. I just kind of dug into this, and I'm curious because I talk about corner all the time, and I always will. That position, other than quarterback, dictates more games than any other position. Winners and losers. You must recruit corners well. It is just a checkbox, yes or no. Right now, UCF is light years above where they are, and I put Demari as a corner as well, even though he's going to play safety because he has that kind of skill. When you have a guy with corner skills playing free safety, good news. He just likes playing safety. That's where he wants to play. He's set on it. I've talked to him about it at length, and that's cool. But his brother Ja'Cari and Nikai can play anywhere. They're coming to UCF. Neither one of the two teams that finished in the Big 12 championship game have recruits based on the offers on the same level as UCF. So it's something to think about. Now, before I wrap this up, I want to pose a question to people. Quarterback and corner are the two most important. In my opinion, defensive end is next. And I can look real quick like what Oak State grabbed a D end. I have no idea, but UCF got a couple really good D ends as well. They got a quarterback in Castellanos. They got the key pieces for what they do at all their spots. Where would you like to see UCF take another step? Take D end out of it, take corner, and take quarterback. Those are the easy ones. Everybody knows those are critical needs. For me, it's D tackle. I'm concerned about it in terms of depth. I'm worried if, and I talked about this yesterday in my podcast, they got to get a transfer, if not two. I don't care what anybody says, numbers at D tackle. They hurt UCF this year, and they could hurt them next year. If a guy just misses 2 games with a high ankle sprain, life is not good. Your rotation is messed up at all, and you play a quality opponent, they're going to run the football down your throat. It makes an offensive coordinator's job very easy. Beyond that, too, is there anything you're really concerned about looking at the roster? From my understanding, Jackson's going to come back, by the way. I maybe that'll change. Big Sam's going to come back for another year and play for UCF one more time. That really helps. the center position, one of your tackles. That's pretty important. Jackson could move over to play left. I don't know which spot he'll play, but he's a good football player, and UCF would be very fortunate to have his services for one more season. Beyond that, I'm not sitting here personally, just looking at it objectively. Is there a position you go, man, UCF is just terrible right there. They need so much help, blah, blah, blah. There isn't one. And this just in, I study UCF 7 days a week. It's what I do to get paid. There isn't a position like that. They are, except for Cincinnati, in my opinion, the most balanced roster moving forward in the non-Power 5. And it's pretty close because Cincinnati was very junior and senior heavy. They've got a pretty good young quarterback named Evan Prater, but they're going to take a drop off. They've lost coaches. Their offensive coordinator went to LSU with Brian Kelly. Their special teams coordinator just signed up with Notre Dame. That's their third coach that's went to Notre Dame in the last 3 years, by the way. It's kind of random. But they're getting picked apart, and they lost their quarterback. Another guy, his only offer was Cincinnati, which is so bizarre because he was such a good college quarterback. They're going to kind of fall down. Now, UCF, I expect not to be as talented next year. Overall, they lost some key players. And, of course, Tatum Bethune jumping ship and going to Florida State is not exactly helpful. But they got these recruits coming in, and they were still pretty young in the secondary. They got Ricky Barber, et cetera. There's no spot that I go, man, they're just terrible. Linebacker's a little bit of a concern because you don't know how Terrence Lewis is going to transition. Does he pick up the scheme and all that? But he'll be the most talented player on the roster from day one. And there's NFL players coming back. That tells you something. Terrence Lewis is a freak. Trust me on that. He can play corner as a linebacker. And I mean that in all sincerity. I've watched him do it. There's a video, if you look around, there's a kid from Miami that was a real twitchy kid that challenged him. They videoed, and he couldn't get off the line against Terrence. Terrence ate him alive. So he's a special athlete. So even though the depth may not be exactly where you would want it at linebacker, UCF's in pretty good shape there in terms of at least the upper end. Jeremiah is a good linebacker. You put him next to Terrence, it's a pretty darn good start. And they have some other guys too. Let's see how that plays out. And they might add another player from the portal, et cetera. It's hard to say. And they got Cameron coming in. Cameron Moore, I think, is going to help. TJ is going to help. Speed. I don't think there's any position where UCF is just in dire straits. They just don't have, just to put it in perspective and state the obvious, the truly, oh my God player, they don't have Will Anderson. Either does anybody else. He's probably the best pass rusher / edge defender I have seen in college football in the last 20 years. And he happened to pick Alabama. Fantastic. It just is what it is. He has over 30 tackles for loss. It's insane. Forget where he's at now, but that's the difference between Alabama / Georgia, Clemson, Ohio State, like the schools that are always around that top 5, corner, DN, quarterback, some of those things. Like even Notre Dame, like again, they don't have all the corners they need. They don't. Quarterback's been iffy. They finally think they have the guy. Penn State's kind of in that same boat. UCF's really not that far from some of these schools. They need a couple more guys to elevate the program. Terrence should be one of them. I also think that if Bowser comes back, that would be one hell of a bonus. And if Jalen comes back healthy, UCF could surprise me and everybody else. This roster is a lot better when I really dug into it than I originally thought. I was thinking 7-5, 8-4 next year. But you got to remember, everybody else loses players too. Cincinnati's not going to be in the same stratosphere. They may lose to Cincinnati. I have no idea because they're going to get transfers and they recruit. Don't get me wrong. They've got a good coaching staff. But they're going to take a step back from where they were. Let's see what happens. I also think that UCF, now that the system is in place, some of those players that were on the roster, freshmen and sophomores, that may have played a little bit this past season, will elevate. And of course, we'll get to see a little bit of that in the spring game. So that's something to think about. But anyway, just kind of wanted to pass on my thoughts about the corner situation. If UCF, they got Devontae Brown and Corey Thornton, Brandon Adams, et cetera. They've got some good young DBs playing corner. And I think they could even move Adams to safety, at least in theory, because they have enough numbers. That's crazy to move a corner. That's, if he's got potential, but he's a really long kid. If you want to get him on the field, maybe they do. So UCF is in a good position moving forward, and I think they're going to hit the ground running once they reach the Big 12, assuming that it ends up being in 2023 with contracts. Anything could change. But I like where UCF stands right now, and I really don't think there's going to be any reason to believe that they're going to take a step back. So anyway, everybody have a great day, and thank you very much.